want to talk about bass because it's such an important topic. It's the fundamentals of any hi-fi system. And just like loudspeaker manufacturers, we as consumers need to choose how much we want and when we want it and how we want it. And this involves quite a number of different variables, which I will be talking through in the length of this video, hopefully bringing it all together by the end. And talking about the end, at the end of the video, I'm going to walk out to a track that I think you'll find a little bit different from my usual kind of music, but it's an amazing track because it really does demonstrate how bass travels through loudspeakers and whether loudspeakers can cope with it. In fact, it covers the whole frequency range from very low, just around 20 hertz, right up to probably 20,000 hertz. But it's a bit of fun. And so if you want to skip all the bass and the blah, blah, blah stuff, just skip along through the video until you see the empty chair. And that's where you'll know I'm playing the outro today. Okay, but let's go back to the beginning. And I want to put this video in a context by telling you a little story that happened to me around about 2013. We'd just finished the configuration that we have today of the Sibelius SG and CG loudspeaker. We were very happy with it. The listening panel was saying, stop, it's fine, there's nothing more to do. And in fact, we've just left it exactly as it is from that point. But I was looking around the studio, I was looking at the listening room and various things to think, well, what is the final amplification that we're going to use with it, and how are we going to do that at our shows and in demos and reviews, and what will we recommend when people ask. And so I went over to see my friend Dimitri at his house. It's not so far from here. And after we'd finished listening to some different amplifiers and whatever, and him talking about hi-fi over a glass of wine as you do, I noticed his two teenage daughters on the other side of the room, and they were playing music to each other and laughing and joking. And I said to Dimitri, how is it possible that your daughters are listening to music on their phones? I don't think they were even smartphones. They were just an ordinary phone. And 6 feet in front of them, 2 meters away, less probably, was this wonderful hi-fi system that most people would give their right arm for. I mean, I think it was a pair of large Darleys. They were on stands, but they were almost floor standers. Beautifully finished, I remember. Incredible. And then in between was an Aeon tube amplifier with big tubes. It must have been a single-ended triode version. Anyway, it was fantastic. I said, Dimitri, how is it possible? And he said, Harley, don't even go there. And I said, why? He said, I have tried every argument. I've persuaded. Look on the table, just in front of them, is that little smart pad. See that? If they just tap that pad, it will come alive and every piece of music of the world is on there. They can click play and it will come out of the speakers. But they don't. And I thought, well, if this is the future of hi-fi, then why am I continuing with this business? Why am I starting this business with my daughter? Because surely it's all dead in a few years' time. Then when I was driving home, I remembered a conversation I had with my father when I was about 11 years old. I'd bought a transistor radio, 6 transistors. It was a little one, it would fit in your hand, and had a little leather pouch. And I was very happy with it. And my father saw it and he said, Harley, what's that? And I said, it's a transistor radio, Dad. He said, my God, where did you get it? And I said, I bought it. Where did you get the money from? I said, I paid for it with my paper round money. I did a little paper round delivering newspapers in the neighbourhood. And over several weeks, I managed to save enough to buy this radio. Anyway, my father said, how much did it cost? And I said, well, I knew my dad well, so I told him half of what it actually cost. I divided it by 2. And he said, my God, he said, that's a lot of money. My God, and listen to the quality. I mean, what is that? Is that a man? Is that a woman? Is that a child? Can you even understand a word they say? And I said, yes, Dad. Yeah, Dad, I can hear every word. It's fine, honestly. Now, obviously, I was a bit upset by the whole thing, but it was something I was quite used to be honest. And I realise now that there was a relationship between me and that little radio. I had chosen it, I had bought it, and I knew very well what real music sounded like and real voices sounded like, because I played the viola in an orchestra, and I had the double basses just behind me, and you could hear them going boom, 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 and you could feel them. I know what a piano, I know what strings, I knew what brass sounded like, but I also knew what a record could sound like, because downstairs my dad had a radiogram with a big Celestion loudspeaker in it. I think it was a 15-inch, it might have been a 12-inch, but it was big anyway. In my eyes, it was a very big driver. And I was trying to build at the time, in our little woodwork shop downstairs, loudspeaker cabinets and enclosures with smaller drive cones, which I got from everywhere and anywhere, to try and emulate in my bedroom what the sound of my dad's gramophone played like in the big living room. And of course, I wasn't allowed to touch that gramophone. No one was. That was his. So there is this big relationship emotional relationship between the equipment that we bought, inherited, chosen, and its performance. And where it fails, our brains fill in. And I can remember that very clearly, because I would take out the little radio from its case and slide it under the pillow at night time and listen to Radio North Sea International, which was a sort of pirate radio station off the coast of Britain. And they used to play all the music, you know, Jimi Hendrix and that lot, which was not played on the BBC at that time. So this would have been 66, between 66 and 69, to be honest. And so there you go, there is a connection. And I was enjoying the music without most of the information. And there's a word I like to use between enjoying music, listening to music, and appreciating music. And you can listen to music in the car or whatever, and you can enjoy it. But to appreciate it, that means to sit and to listen closely, and to hear every nuance of the musicians, to feel the rumble in the lower bass, to hear the little ting of a little bell or a cymbal when the drummer's just tapped it. And in order to do that, of course, you have to have the right equipment, but you've also got to have the right source material. Now, many people choose stand mount loudspeakers, you know, little bookshelves, and they put them on stands in their rooms. And I think fundamentally they do it because they look cute. And they can look really cute, and especially when you look at them in your hand and you see the little drive cone and you just wonder what they sound like. And when you put them on, you go, wow, there's a lot of bass. I mean, I know I've been there. I've got LS358s, I've got all these different things. And they're not imposing like a big floor stand loudspeaker. And I can see why people do it. But sometimes, not all, but sometimes these little stand mounts, as I call them, don't give you the last 2 octaves. But in theory, most floor standards don't either. So, I mean, ours are flat at 38 hertz, and then they start to roll off pretty quickly. But if you look at the industry in general, and if I take ATC, for example, as a loudspeaker manufacturer, make professional loudspeakers for recording studios and also for domestic consumer. But if you look at all of their loudspeakers, they're all rolling off somewhere around the 40, and then they're down. And even some of them are even higher. But that's a design choice. It's a design choice that we and they and people like Kef make. Even the biggest Kef blades, I think they're beginning to roll off around 28 hertz, which is lower. Some of the American manufacturers, you know, the Magicos of this world, do go lower, and they're designed to go lower. They're multiple drive units, and they're designed to go very loud and also have a very high price ticket with them as well. But The reason why we're doing this as manufacturers is also linked to the fact that most recording engineers, and here I've got both hats on, are not paying much attention to what's going on below 40 hertz. And I know it's an awful thing to say. If I'm recording a double bass and even sometimes a cello, I will place a microphone obviously in the right place and I will take off any kind of low cut filter, because many microphones have low cut filters. So we will just set it on my drop off, roll off at 80, 60, 40 or whatever it is. And that's very important, because sometimes in some recording locations there's all sorts of noises. I mean, there's a famous recording location in Brussels, and when the trams go past, you don't hear them in the location, but you feel them and there's a rumble. And if you don't put some kind of low cut filter on, you'll see the VU meters jumping around. And later on, you really hear that, you know, you hear sort of rumbling around, and there's distortion coming into the audible band, which are not from sounds that you're not actually hearing, because the microphone amplifiers, preamplifiers are amplifying signals which have nothing to do with the main signal. So yes, there's lots of technical reasons why we don't. And in the mixing rooms, most of the time they're rather small, and very low frequencies are just not even taken into consideration. In fact, in mastering, most of the time they're just all removed, just to clean everything up and make a nicer sound. That is for 2-channel stereo. And I'm also referring to music that, you know, certainly from the past. For movies and games, that's something completely different. They are designed differently. A helicopter lands, they want the floor to shake. So therefore, yes, that's a very different story. But I'm talking about 2-channel stereo for the moment. And to understand this, understand the approach of music, I want to consider 1 year in time, 1969. I know it's a long time ago for some people, but I think it clearly defines what I'm trying to say. In September of that year, the Beatles released Abbey Road, and it opens with the track Come Together, and Paul McCartney's playing his favourite Rickenbacker bass, and it's a really rumbling, growling sound, even on the original recording and the original pressing, and that defines the beginning of the track. And George Martin and the engineers at Abbey Road were used to recording symphony orchestras and all sorts of musical events and whatever. And they were fanatical at getting the right sound. But let's not forget that Paul McCartney was too. He was very, very keen on getting the right sound for his double bass, his bass in all of the tracks. On the other hand, later in the year, the Rolling Stones bring out Let It Bleed. And the first track of that, Gimme Shelter, is led with guitar, not bass, and it's led with guitar, and it's a really nice, just a simple sort of riff going round, falling riff, and it's brilliant as an introduction. But you'll notice on that album, it's more about the Rolling Stones sound than the sound of the instruments themselves, if you understand what I mean. There's a subtle difference between the two, and tracks on Let It Bleed might vary widely in terms of the sound concept. Take the last track, you know, You Can't Always Get What You Want. I mean, there are bits on that which are obviously distorting and whatever, but there's an overall sound. But the bass there, Bill Wyman's bass, is way back in the mix, and it isn't there. So if you play that on a really high-end system, I don't think you're necessarily hearing it at its best. I think, and it's only my theory, that that album was mixed and recorded for AM. It was designed to sound great on a Dansette record player in somebody's bedroom. And also there's a famous photograph of Brian Jones actually with his Dansette. And I think that's an important element. It sounded great on the car radio, great on a Dansette, because youngsters who are buying those albums didn't have fantastic hi-fi systems. They were incredibly expensive in those days. So we were listening to it in the car, maybe on a jukebox, on some rackety old record player somewhere, or just on a small little transistor radio like mine. And that guitar opening lead sounded amazing and would have come across and sung to everyone. And it was the Rolling Stone sound. You could tell it instantly. And so you can't reproduce something that's not there. You've got to see it in its context. However, if you go to 1969 and you want a really spectacular recording, then you'd have to choose for yourself a James Last album. Now, James Last was absolutely everything I hated at that age in music, and I still is totally not for me. But his audience was not teenagers, it was people in their 40s and 50s and 60s who had money probably, they had a bit more cash, and probably had the stereos. They were the people downstairs with the stereo in the living room, which the teenagers weren't allowed to touch. And so James Last was very clever. He made sure that his recordings were beautifully recorded. If you pick up his album Hair, or his version of the musical from 1969, and listen to the sound quality on some of those tracks, well, all of them, you'll see what I'm talking about. He really got it right. So they demonstrated so the system would sound good. And there is a difference there, and you've got to remember the context. So whenever people write to me before they invest in a pair of our loudspeakers, the one thing I'll be asking them is, what is your room like? Is it heavily damped? How big is it? What kind of music do you listen to? How loud do you listen to it? When do you listen to it? Is it late at night or is it during the day? I mean, how do you experience it? What's important for you? Because from those answers, we can see whether they're going to have that connection or not. Because it is really vitally important, because the Sibelius loudspeakers, of course, like a lot of very high quality floor standards, will show everything. If there's distortion on the original recording, you're going to hear it, and you're going to hear it clearly. Play it through a Dan set and you won't hear any of it at all, or it will just sound nice. So I'm deviating away from the topic, maybe you might think, but the amount of bass is really important. And if we're saying that down to 40 is important, and I think it is, from 40 to everything up to 80 is a very important part of the frequency spectrum. It's quite easy to get good treble and good mid-range. Manufacturers are able to define and shape it very easily to the sound that they want. But getting very detailed lower bass, where you have a nice connection between the double bass, maybe it's an acoustic bass, and the left hand of the piano, and all those harmonics. Take, for example, a normal rock bass drum. A bass drum will go da-dum, da-dum, and actually it's not very deep. Take, on the other hand, the bass drum that's often played in the last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, when it's going boom, 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 where the march begins. Bom, ba-bom, 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 and there's this bass drum, and often it's played on a huge bass drum. But when you listen to that on a really good floor standing loudspeaker that's able to go down at least to 38, 40 or whatever, and neatly, I don't mean -6 at that, I mean just flat. You hear all these wonderful harmonics and you realize it's not a thump at all. On a modern recording, if you want a comparison with a modern recording, take David Bowie's recording for Lou Reed on Walk on the Wild Side, and you've got the acoustic bass sliding up and down, but there's also an electric bass in there, and there's also a bass drum, boom, 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 boom. And when you listen to that on a really good system, you hear those instruments completely separately. They're not on top of each other at all. Now, some of the stand mount fraternity, because they love their equipment and they want to hang on to it, and I'm absolutely with you, because I know there's absolutely a space for this. I mean, I love them. I mean, they will say, yeah, but what we do is we add a subwoofer. And that's okay, but it's tricky to get it absolutely right and get all the subtleties right. if I was going to recommend it, I'd say get two, and place them as near as you can to each of the loudspeakers. Then also get really good ones like an SVS or a REL, where you can program the cut-in point so that you can roll off and you say, right, my speakers are flat till 60, 50, then I'm just going to take over from there. Don't go above it, because it's pointless. Your loudspeaker manufacturer's taken great pains to make it sound good to that point. Just give it a helping hand from the point where it started to be -3. Bring your subwoofer in at that point so that it's just remaining flat, and just take it down as low as you want and adjust the phasing. Make sure you buy a subwoofer where you can adjust the phasing, because that really will be necessary, and you'll hear when it's right. And then how do you adjust the volume for that? That's really difficult, because on old amplifiers we had bass and treble controls, so you could, if a track was a little bit limiting, you could just go up a notch, 2 dB or whatever, 4 dB. And I've got an old Quad 66. I still use that in my office today. And if I think, oh, it's lacking a bit, I go tap tap on the filter and just move it. Or if I'm playing an old piece of music, it's a bit harsh, I tap on the top and drop the treble down. So what you can do is you set the volume to the level which you think is right and feels comfortable and about right, and then just drop it down a notch. Just take it down 3 dB. And trust me, that will probably be right over the long period of time, because if you don't, it's always fatiguing to listen to, and you're always listening to a subwoofer and a loudspeaker, and somehow you don't get the harmonious whole unless you get that set up correctly. So really, that's it really. If you want more than that's on the original recording, our modern equipment doesn't give you, more often than not, treble and bass controls, although I know that there are some equalizers coming back on the scene which are working digitally now, which work well, but be very careful with those. You can do damage, believe it or not, if they're set up wrong. And listen maybe to the audiophiliac. He's done a video on one of them, which seems to work quite well. But generally, I have that relationship with my equipment like I had with my transistor radio. When I've got the amplifiers I like, when I've got my loudspeakers ready and I've got the cables connected and I've got everything, I just want to focus on the music. I just want to enjoy it, and I want to have fun and not worry about settings and fiddling around. Just go with it and accept that life is always a compromise, and somewhere there's probably someone who's got something just a little bit better or whatever than you have. And it's also like a wine on holiday. You drink a fabulous wine on a terrace in southern Italy, and you bring the wine back and it doesn't seem quite the same drinking it in a dinner party in Belgium in the rain. Something's gone. Hi-fi systems are things which you get to use to, and your ears adjust, and they forgive. They forgive things which are not quite there. Anyway, I think I've covered what I wanted to say. I'm going to play out now with a track called Infinity, and it's by an artist called Shore Grooves. And as I say, it's going to have a lot of bass in it and long bass notes. So that's also a good test for your amplifier to see if it can continue to deliver what's required at a reasonable volume. And also you'll notice it will go into, after about 2 minutes, it goes into a little quiet section. It's only 3 minutes long. And in this little quieter section, calmer section, I should say, there's some low bass notes, and as the bass notes lift, you think, okay, that's it. But listen closely. There's a very low rumble that's coming in just on the audible spectrum, which is from 20 hertz upwards is the audible spectrum. And see if you are getting any of that in your room, because actually it's probably quite a bit high. It's probably about 35 hertz, to be honest with you. But see if you got it, and see what you think of the whole sound, and play it. And for fun, we've got permission from Shore Grooves to put this on the shop website, the Pearl Acoustics shop website, which is LPMC. Just go to Pearl Acoustics and you can go to the shop, and there you can download the MP3 version for free. But there's also the 24-bit 96K version, which you if you make a donation, pay €5, you can download that. Now, let me be straight here. If you do that, the €5, all of it goes to Shaw Grooves. It goes to the musicians. In fact, if you buy any CDs on our website, we don't have many, some of them recorded by me, others just from friends or whatever. Any ones you buy, all the money goes to the musicians. We don't make any profit on our CDs. It's just there for the pleasure for our customers and also as a donation, as I say, to the musicians to support them. Goodness knows it's been a very difficult year this year and it's not over yet. So thank you for that if you go there and do that. However, there's just one person I want to thank. I want to thank one of our customers called Gabor, who lives in Hungary. And he, in a way, without knowing it, has inspired this video, because when customers buy speakers from us, we often ask them if they would mind sending us a photograph. We're very nosy. We like to see what it's like. And Gabor sent a photograph from Hungary. And I'll show, it's on our website. You can see it in the review section. And there's a pair of our loudspeakers, and next to the Sibelius are these huge Dynaudios. I mean, they're monsters, and they've got a big bass unit at the bottom and a mid-range and a tweeter at the top, and they're really spaced out, everything that our speakers are. And I said to him, Gabor, what's this about? Well, what's happening there? Why? And he said, well, he said, Harley, he said, for anything acoustic, anything subtle, jazz, and even a bit of classical and a light rock and whatever, vocals, all those things, Sibelius. But when I'm in a heavy metal mood and I want to blast it and I want to drive it, he said, that's when I use the Dynaudios. And he said, but the strange thing, he said, is that got the Sibelius and Dynaudios have exactly the same amount of bass. And I said, yeah, of course, because that's what we've designed for. We've designed for the full bass. When a voltage goes into the back of the loudspeaker, any given voltage, we want the same level of output, whether it's in the high range or in the low range. Like any good manufacturer, that's what we're aiming for. So it's logical that we will make the same amount of bass as those big ones. It's just that his big speakers are designed to go loud, and they will give a very similar sound to a live rock concert, because on the rock concert stage, you've got all your big bass drivers at the bottom of your stack. Then you've got your PA and your vocals in the middle and guitars in the middle of the stack. And at the top, you have your tweeter stack. And this is just pointing out into the audience. So you have this wall of sound coming at you. Well, that's how it used to be. I know it's evolving now. And that in many ways is what his Dynaudios are emulating. So it's no wonder that it sounds absolutely great for that kind of music. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video. I'm going to play out now with Shaw Grooves and Infinity. Enjoy.